also our 2022 convention workshop coordinator. And then she served previously as bylaws coordinator, chair of New York State PTA nominations, and she's also the Empire State PTSA elected president. She has over 35 years PTA experience, and then she'll introduce our host today. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob, for that introduction, and thank you everyone for attending this evening. One of the most important things that we can do in PTA is to do certain processes the correct way. And one of those is nominations and elections. And I call this one, it's a mystery to me, because so many times as region director and even as bylaws coordinator, I would always have questions regarding the election was not done right, the committee was not elected, et cetera, et cetera. And in fact, one of my very first region workshops when I was a unit member was a nominations and elections workshop because I had been elected to the nominating committee. So I hope to dispel some of that mystery for you this evening and give you the information that you need to do the process correctly. And it really makes for a smooth transition when it comes to new leadership. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat box. And after the PowerPoint is over, then we'll take questions. So let's begin. For all information on nominations and elections, we have a very important resource guide that is available to all members on the website, section 7. You would click on the New York State website, go to the Leaders tab, and click on the resource guide. And section 7 is titled Bylaws, Procedures, Nominations, and Elections. And in fact, that section is the resource guide front cover. We are in the process of doing some editing with the resource guide, but this is what it currently looks like, section 7. And there is the nominations section. And that gives you a great deal of basic information on the process of nominations and elections. So I ask you to make sure that you have that available when you're going to start the process. So first thing is to elect your nominating committee. And this is very, very important. The nominating committee should be elected, must be elected according to your bylaws. And they must be elected at least 60 days prior to your election meeting. However, you can do it anytime earlier. So if your election meeting is April, how do I know my election meeting? That is in your bylaws, okay? Then I would at least say by February, you should be electing your nominating committee so they can begin their work in order to be able to report at the election meeting in April. Your bylaws, again, a very important piece of what you need when you're going through this process, specify the total number of members of the committee, how many would be elected from the executive board, and how many from the general membership, and if you are able to elect an alternate. The committee, once elected, elects its own chair. And according to Robert's rules, the first named member of the committee would get together a committee meeting. It could be done after the election at the meeting, could be done by a screen chat, whatever, a Zoom call, and the committee elects its chair. And this is a special committee. It's designed for a specific task. And once that task is done, then the committee disbanded is no longer in existence, unlike standing committees such as perhaps hospitality or beautification, which work all year long. The best option, of course, is to have a live meeting for the election. And remember that you need representatives from both the executive board. The executive board, of course, consists of your executive committee, which is your officers, maybe your immediate past president, and your chairman of the standing committee. It might also include council delegates. It also might include your historian, your principal, your teacher liaison. That information is found in your bylaws. And you need representatives from your general membership. That is anyone who is not a part of the executive board. So it's important to know the distinction. And this is to ensure that you have representation from all sections of your PTA. You could do the election on the same day. You could do an executive board meeting at 7 and a general membership right after at 7:30, so that you would have all of the members elected at the same time on the same day. And then the committee would meet after the meeting to elect its chairman. If you consider a hybrid meeting, we have a lot of information on our PTA website about hybrid meetings and elections. and voting and polling. So please check out the website for more specific information on those types of meetings if you have to use that, or just a virtual meeting. The chair will select the time and place for the meeting that all members are able to attend. This is very important. You want to select a time that you know everyone on the committee will be able to attend. There should be no games here that, well, we'll meet here because we know June works on Monday morning, so let's have the meeting on Monday morning. That's not fair to June, and it's not fair to the membership. So find a time and place mutually agreeable to all the members. Only the elected members of the committee may attend. This meeting can be virtual, but again, only members of the committee may attend. And if an alternate is elected, they will only attend if one other member is unavailable. So sometimes you might want to consider electing an alternate in case of an emergency where one of your members is unable to attend. You have somebody to step into that place. The meeting should be held in a private setting free from distractions, a private home. Your libraries will have rooms available, but not a diner, not in the middle of a school building someplace. It has to be secure so that you're not interrupted, so that you can do your deliberations confidentially, and that's very important. Copy of the bylaws should be available, and recommendation letters should be sent out by the chair to the membership. You can do this via backpack, letters going home, or you can use a Google form to ask for recommendations. Now, these recommendations, if you do it by Google form and email, please create a specific email just for the nominating committee chair. So only they are receiving those recommendations, and then it's very, very confidential. So that's very important. So that will never be shared with anyone else but the committee. If she has just a regular email, there's a lot of other things going on in that email, and recommendations can get lost or can get passed on accidentally. So it's very important to keep that confidentiality. And of course, the chair should have a copy of the current membership list to make sure that the people that you're nominating are members of the PTA. Here's a sample recommendation form that you could send out via, by mail or via email, or create a Google form that just lists the office, the name, and someone can write qualifications and comments about the candidate, and you would leave room for more than one name so that people can recommend multiple members. And also you can self-recommend. You can send in a recommendation form for yourself if indeed you would like to be considered for an office. Again, we talk about bylaws, very important. The bylaws will state the officers to be elected. Do I have one vice president? Do I have 3 vice presidents? Do I have 1 secretary, or do I have 2 secretaries? Of course, the minimum number of officers that a PTA must have is a president, a secretary, and a treasurer. But many other units have more than that. If the council delegates are appointed, then that's done through the executive board. If they're elected by the executive board, again, that's the purveyance of the executive board. However, your bylaws may state that they are elected by the membership. In that case, then your nominating committee would have to bring however many names for council delegates to the membership for election. So it's very important that you look at that in your bylaws. The bylaws will also tell you the month of the election meeting and when the proposed slate of officers should be published. And we'll talk about this in a few minutes. And the last one, which is extremely important, is if there is a required 2-day notice to run from the floor. And we'll talk about that again. So recommendation forms should only be opened at the meeting in the presence of all committee members. And remember that these are for information only. They are not binding. You do not count, well, Jane had 6, but Rob only had 3, so Jane had more recommendations. It really goes as advisory only. Deliberate as a committee who will be the best candidate for each position. And that's why having members from both the executive board and the membership can bring in names that perhaps not everyone knows, but other people may say, well, I've seen this volunteer. She has worked at every one of our events. She's not a chairman, but she works very hard, and I think she'd be great for secretary, whatever. So having that information from a wide variety of people is important. Deliberate, and if a member of the nominating committee is being considered for an office, they should leave the meeting during the discussion. If you're on a Zoom call, Just log out of the Zoom call for whatever time. The chair will call you back when the discussion is over. Consider the kind of leadership that will best achieve the aims and purposes of the PTA. Review the tenure of incumbent officers, those that are currently in office now, to determine their eligibility. Remember that officers are eligible for another term, if so stated in your bylaws, but not entitled. That's important to remember. Oh, we don't have to worry about nominating committee because everybody gets another year. I hear that all the time. Everybody does not automatically get another year. They still must be elected. And maybe they have not done the best job for your PTA, and you really believe they might need to be replaced. So that's important to remember. All officers' terms are for 1 year unless you have a 2-year term specified in your bylaws. But no person should be automatically nominated for a second term if for some reason they have not done the job that they've been expected to do. And avoid reshuffling officers. This does not foster leadership in your PTA, and it gives the appearance of a clique in your PTA, and it might create some animosity and some issues which down the road could be very harmful to your PTAs. This is very important. All deliberations should be kept confidential within the confines of the discussions, the emails that may go back and forth between the committee members, not for wide discussion. Once the slate has been completed, the chair will call the potential nominees. When the chair has received verbal acceptance from the nominees, they should contact the president to tell the president what the proposed slate is. Because according to your bylaws, the president should publish the nominating committee slate either 2 weeks or 1 month prior to the election meeting. So that is up to the president to do. So as soon as you have the nominees and you receive written confirmation, then you can immediately tell the president once you have the nominees, and before the election meeting, you must receive written confirmation that the nominees have agreed to serve. And again, all members they must be members of the PTA at the time of election. If they have not joined yet, it is up to the chairman to say, we cannot accept your letter of acceptance until you become a member, because they have to be a member at the time of election. That is in our bylaws. The proposed slate, and this is very difficult, should be kept confidential until all the nominees have accepted and the announcement has been made to the membership. Frequently, you will call someone and they say, well, but who's going to be vice president? Who's going to be secretary? If they need somebody else to be on the committee and they want to know, then maybe they're not the best person to nominate for that position. If it's so important for them to have the names of the other nominees, it is not up to the nominating committee chair to say that. It is for the president to publish that when everything is completed. The chair will send a formal acceptance letter to each nominee that should be signed and returned to the chair. And then the committee should also complete a written report that will be presented at the election meeting and is given to the secretary to be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. That's very important. This is an important piece of information that should be in the minutes, must be in the minutes. So here's a sample acceptance letter. Here's the name of your PTA, the date. The name of the person would go here. Thank you for accepting the office. And then, please have it back to the committee chair by a certain date, few days. Okay, since we can do things by email, it's easy to do that in a few days. And then the nominating committee chair would sign their name on the bottom. And then a sample report for your membership that you will give to the secretary on the day of the election meeting. The nominating committee met on the following date. Okay, list the members in attendance. We acted in accordance with the guidelines in the resource guide and the bylaws of the PTA. And we placed the following names for election to office. And you list the names, and then the members should all sign it to show that they all have agreed on the slate of officers. And again, this is an important piece of information that needs to be given to the secretary at the election meeting, and it gets placed in the minutes. So here's a sample nominating committee report. Remember I said that the report needs to be published, and that would be up to the president to do that. How do they publish it? They can put it in a newsletter. They can put it out on Facebook. They can put it up of a bulletin board. Whatever your committee, your PTA's normal way to get information out to your members. That's how the president would do this. And it would just state the following. These are the following members have been nominated for the office, and list their names. Also, information on the election meeting. The general meeting will be on May 25th. You must be a member in order to vote. Membership will be accepted until 5 p.m. on May 23rd. There are no absentee ballots. You must be present in order to vote. We do not use absentee ballots. You must be present to vote. Now, if it's on a Zoom call, then there are ways to create a poll that will only go out to those members who are registered for the meeting and are ensured that they are members. Now, this part in yellow would be put in only if your bylaws state that there needs to be a 2-day notice of intent to run from the floor. So this would be in here, according to our bylaws, notice of intent to run from the floor must be received at least 2 business days prior to the date of the election. So intent to run must be received by the nominating committee chair at least by 5 p.m. May 23rd. So this way, the nominating committee chair now knows that they have someone or multiple people who would like to run from the floor against one of these 4 people who are nominated. She would then obviously let the president know about that, and then it would be taken up at the meeting, and we'll talk about elections. What if there's a vacancy? What if somebody who has accepted a nomination for whatever reason withdraws their name? They call you up as a nominating committee chair and they say, you know what, my husband got a new job, I'm moving out of town, I have to decline, the position of secretary. Well, normally if the committee can reconvene and it's soon enough before the election meeting, they can reconvene and come up with a new nominee, and then that would be communicated to the membership by the president. If there's no time for the committee to meet, then the office will be considered an open position and will be addressed at the election meeting. If no candidate has given the required prior notice, then the position will be considered a vacancy. So let's say the president puts out that we have received notice that Joe Santos cannot, accept the nomination for president. It is now an open position. If you would like to run from the floor, please communicate that information to the nominating committee chair by whatever the date is. And then somebody could do that prior to the meeting. And again, this is if you have the 2-day notice. If a nominee has already been elected and resigns, then it becomes a vacancy that is filled by an election of the executive board. So there's different ways to handle a vacancy depending on when it happens. So how about the election meeting? We have our nominating committee has done their job. They've given the slate over to the president. The president has published the slate in accordance with the bylaws. Everyone knows when the date of the election meeting is. So what do we need to do from here? Well, first of all, the notice of the election should be made at least 30 days prior to the date of the meeting. And it's a good idea when you publish your calendar at the beginning of the meeting, you know the month your election meeting has to take place. It's in your bylaws. So you can put the date right there on your calendar, May 25th, election meeting. And that way, everybody has been notified from day one that this is going to be the election meeting. But of course, sending out reminders about that is extremely important. Again, the guidelines in the resource guide section 7 spell out some information on how to conduct an election. We also have information on the website about conducting a virtual election. So I would ask you to check that out if that's what you need to do. And this is a general membership meeting. Those present who can vote must be a member of the association. So it's important that the membership chair have a current membership list, and with Member Hub, and people can join literally, up to the time prescribed in your publishing of the election of the nominating results. Then it's very easy for people to become members prior to the election meeting. You don't have to worry about selling memberships before the meeting, etc. And a set of meeting rules can be sent along with the agenda for the meeting. If you're going to have an election, it's important to have some meeting rules to let people know what will happen if there should be a contested election, particularly. So here are some possible meeting rules. And again, this would be more for if you're going to have a contested election where somebody is running against one of the candidates. If there is only one candidate for an office, the election will be by voice vote. Okay, that's in our bylaws. And Robert's rules said if only one person is nominated, the bylaws do not require that a ballot vote be taken. The chair can also simply declare the nominee is elected. If there is more than one candidate for an office, the election will be by ballot vote. That must be done if you have more than one candidate running for an office. Each candidate will be allowed a 2-minute statement stating their reasons and qualifications for running for office. Okay, if you have 2 people running, you would like to know a little bit about them because you may not know them personally. So it is a good idea to do a little bit of a statement or qualifications or why they're running, but a time limit is necessary for that. 2 tellers will be appointed to count the ballots and certify the election. The tellers cannot obviously be candidates or friends of candidates, but they should be impartial members who would be appointed by the president. Voting will close immediately after all ballots have been collected. Election will be by majority, and the election results will be announced as soon as possible after the balloting is finished. So this is just a possible set of rules, and it's important that these be then published prior to the election meeting so that everybody knows exactly what's going to happen at the meeting. Of course, you always have to make sure that a quorum has been obtained and that number, whatever it is in your bylaws, and that the secretary is taking accurate minutes. So we'll go through a couple of different scenarios about running the election. So scenario 1 is where no candidates are running from the floor. If no one is running from the floor or no position is being challenged, then your election can be by voice vote, again, according to what's listed in your bylaws. The nominating committee chair will announce the proposed slate of the officers, and the report is filed with the secretary's minutes. The president now then will run the election. It is not the nominating committee's chair to do job to do that. The president will conduct the election. He will announce each name in turn and allow for a voice vote each time. So this is if no candidate is running, no 2-day notice was required in your bylaws. For the office of president, the nominee is Joe Santos. All those in favor say aye. You have elected Joe Santos as your president. Congratulations. Or the president can simply say, Joe Santos is declared elected. That's also acceptable language. Because under Robert's rules, when there is but one candidate for an office, that candidate is declared elected. Members can only vote against a candidate by nominating an alternate candidate. In reality, Joe Santos needs but one vote to win. And so even if you don't want to vote for him, it's not going to keep him or that person from being elected. So you cannot vote no against a person if there is only one candidate. Once all candidates have been elected, you've completed your election and the nominating committee's work is done. So then they would not have any other meetings. They would hand in their report to the secretary, as I said, and then their work is done. Scenario number 2 is where candidates have given notice of intent to run from the floor. So in this case, you will know at least 2 days prior to the election that someone is going to challenge an officer, a person who is nominated from the floor. So the secretary should have ballots and teller sheets. Teller sheets are just sheets to tally up the votes. And these can be prepared in advance since you'll know the names of the candidates for each office prior to the election. So that's the advantage, one of the advantages of having the 2-day notice. You know who the candidates are, so ballots can be prepared ahead of time. The nominating committee chair will read the proposed slate of officers, and then taking one office at a time, the president will ask the chair if there were any notices of intent to run received. And of course, the chair of the nominating committee will have already communicated that to the president. Any office for which there is more than one candidate must have a ballot vote, and each office that is being contested should have a separate vote. Instructions for voting should be given by the president. If you have a ballot with names on it, check only one name, fold your ballot in half, hand the ballot to the teller. The president will appoint the tellers will collect the ballots, leave the room, tally the ballots, and then come back with the results. The third scenario is probably the most difficult because it is a case where you do not have any 2-day notice to run from the floor. So the president will again announce the nominating committee's choice for the office. The committee chair comes and brings their report to the membership. And then for each office, the president will ask if anyone is interested or there are any nominations from the floor. Because there is no 2-day notice, you don't know if someone has decided the last minute or has been convinced by someone to run for a particular office. So it's important that the president does this for each office. Now, a candidate can self-nominate, that's acceptable, or be nominated by someone else, but they must accept the nomination. So they have to be there. They can't just bring a paper saying, oh, I know that Jane wants to run for president, but she can't be here. Okay, it's different if she's the nominated candidate, but if she's running from the floor, if that person is running from the floor, they need to be there to accept the nomination. Prior to the election, each candidate may be given the opportunity to speak according to your meeting rules, which is only fair that everybody has the opportunity to speak if they wish. And the names of candidates should be written down on a board or an easel or projected on a screen. Ballots are distributed and instructions from the president should be given regarding the ballots. Print first and last name of candidate, fold the ballot in half, hand the ballot to the teller, or if you use a ballot box, place it in the ballot box. And again, membership lists are important so that you know that the only people receiving ballots are those who are members. And they must, have information must be given by the membership chair. And once the results are announced, the election for that office is over, and the election for the next office can proceed until all offices have been elected. So this is probably the most difficult of the 3 scenarios to navigate through, because when you get to the meeting, you may not be sure, as we said, because there is no required notice, if anybody will challenge an office from the floor. So in that case, again, secretary be prepared with ballots and teller sheets in case they are needed. The announcing results, the head teller hands the paper to the president, and the president announces the results. Total votes cast, 40, needed for election, since it's by majority, would be 21. Joe Santos received 25, Jane Doe received 11. There were 4 invalid ballots. They may have been blank. They may have not written the names correctly. They may have just put initials on, whatever. And you have elected Joe Santos as your president. Congratulations. And the secretary records the results just as they're written on the teller sheet in the minutes, so that now you have a record of the fact that your membership did elect these people to office. Very, very important. Your minutes are a very important piece of your PTA's documents. And this is of just the last couple of notes here. The process of nominations and elections can at times become highly contentious and spark controversy. And as a past region director, I can tell you that there have been many, many times that I did receive phone calls regarding the fact that the nominating committee wasn't elected or the election wasn't handled properly. And if there is concern by a unit that this could happen, you can certainly contact your region director for assistance, and they can come in and help you to run the election properly. And obviously they have no personal stake in the election, so as impartial judges, they can certainly be fair and balanced. And that would make sure that the election is done completely fairly. So that's an important thing to think about. If you feel that things have not been done right, and you don't want to end up having shouting and things at the meeting, call in your region director for assistance. They're always willing to help. So by following the processes and procedures outlined in the presentation, you can assure your membership that your PTA is being transparent and will enable them to have continued confidence in and support for their leadership. Okay, and there's my contact information. So of course, if you have any questions, and I'll be happy to answer any questions from the chat. Thank you. Rob?
Jackie, so I jotted down a few questions. So we'll start with the first one. How and when must a notice that the 2-day notice of intent is required to be nominated to run for a position?
Okay, as I said, when the president puts out the published slate, that would be in the published slate. So that is at least a month prior to the election. okay, at least a month or at least 2 weeks. So that gives a person who wishes to run from the floor at least 2 weeks notice to say, I want to run from the floor. I have to send an email, a note, has to be in writing to the nominating committee chair that I intend to run. So that it gives them plenty of time to decide, or if they'd been deciding after they, knew the slate, but at least 2 days notice. And again, it depends on if your bylaws say that, but that would be communicated when the slate is published.
Thanks, Jackie. And I know because of COVID, the next question, New York State PTA specifically posted a lot of information on virtual elections. But the question came in, how would you conduct a ballot election on Zoom?
Well, there is a way to do it by a poll. Okay, what you would do is you would have a link to a poll, a Google form, okay, in which you would have the names of those people who are contesting for that particular office. And I would say take it one office at a time so that it's less confusing. The poll results give few minutes for everybody to get the poll. If somebody can't get the poll, sometimes what we will do is use a text and ask them to text a certain member of the executive committee what their vote is. And then you would have a teller, just like you would have a secretary, who would be the one who's collecting the poll and counting the ballots and looking at the results. And then those results would be shared with the membership. So more specifics about that, again, on the COVID page in particular, there is still information about the doing virtual elections and ballot voting.
Thanks, Jackie. The next one is, how do you get people to volunteer to be part of the nominating committee?
That's a very, very difficult question. What I would remind everybody is, you're going to have, at the meeting before, of course, it has to be a general membership meeting if you're going to be electing members, and the executive board meeting would only be executive board members. But remind them that this is the future of your PTA, and without officers, the PTA cannot do their job. So therefore, cannot do the wonderful things that we do for the students in our schools. So we need people to step up. So if you would be part of the nominating committee, you're the person who gets to decide, in a sense, who you think would be the best person for the particular job. And even as I said, nominating committee members can certainly be nominated for positions if they are eligible. So that is an important piece. And reminding people that it is an important role, it is an important job to do. And if you don't have elections, you can't have a PTA without officers, and your officers have a specific term of office. And at the end of that term, they are finished. Okay, each of those offices becomes a vacancy. So without a nominating committee, it would be very difficult to continue with your PTA. And it's just important to stress the importance of it and have them, look at the webinars that we've done. I've done this multiple times. All the webinars are on the website, as well as the information in the resource guide. People kind of tend to shy away from it, but realizing that it is the most important thing, one of the most important things that your PTA can do is make sure that your leadership is sustainable. And if you don't have a nominating committee to ensure that, then your PTA is going to have a lot of difficulty doing the job that it really needs to do for our kids.
Yeah, just to add a little bit to that, the bylaws specifically state how the nominating committee composition should be. And then also a good footnote is when you start your PTA at the beginning of the year and you start forming all the other committees, the nominating committee is one of the key ones as well to recruit at that time.
Right. And that can certainly, as I mentioned, can be definitely any time. We have in Suffolk region, we have a year-round committee. We elect them at spring conference, and then they do their job and come to our meetings. One of the requirements is to attend our board meetings to get to meet everybody. And then they are they do their job and then report at the next spring conference. So they're basically, from spring to the next spring, they're in place. And again, you can feel free to do that if you feel that you have more members at one of your first couple of meetings, which is usually the case in the fall and kind of goes down as the weather gets colder. That's when you might want to ask for nominating, people to run for the nominating committee, because that's when you might have the most members interested. So, try to pick a meeting that might be the best time. And again, the fact that if it's bad weather, you can call a Zoom meeting in order to do that as well.
Okay. The next one is the winner by majority vote
Yes, in your bylaws, it does state that vote is by majority, yes.
Okay.
So if
The
you
other one
have,
is,
just a follow-up on that, if you have 3 candidates and you don't have a majority, then you have to have another election. Or sometimes one of the candidates will say, no, okay, I'll bow out of the election. So sometimes with 3 candidates, it can be difficult to get a majority, and you might have to do more than one ballot vote. So that's why I always say for any election meeting, the secretary should come prepared with ballots just in case there are multiple elections for an office.
okay. The other question is, if the bylaw states a certain amount of members need to be from the nominating committee, they have to be from the executive board. Is it okay if those are executive committee members?
Yes, absolutely. Only the president is the only one of the officers that cannot serve on the nominating committee, but any other officer is eligible to serve. So if you need 3 from the executive board, they could be from the executive committee, although you'd want to, have additional members, not just officers on the committee, but you also have the ability to elect from the committee chairman, historian, council delegate, and those others that are on the executive board. So yes, they can be from the executive committee, except for the president.
I think the other one you answered, how do you elect non-executive board members? It's usually at the PTA meetings,
Yes.
and as long as they're PTA members, is that correct?
Right. At a general membership meeting. That's why I say sometimes the beginning meetings, you have general membership because you have to pass a budget and you want to look at your bylaws, maybe have to be reviewed. So that would be a time when you'd have people who are not committee chairs or are not officers, not the council delegate or the historian, and they would be eligible then for election as a general membership member or association member, we call it.
Yeah, and I think this was a follow-up to that one, but it's more of a clarification. Do you have to give notice to those people, or can you at the general meeting conduct a vote for nominating committee? So I think it's the latter one only.
Yeah, I think you can do it at any meeting, at any general membership meeting, but I would actually advertise it so that people know that we will be doing this. Just like you have to advertise an election meeting, you could put it in the previous meetings, business for next time, if you will, or announcements. Next month in, October, we will be electing the general members for our nominating committee. Nothing wrong with putting that out there. And the fact that we communicate with our membership so easily through emails and Member Hub and Facebook, it's very easy to get that information out there. And then you may spark the interest of someone who otherwise might not think about it if they, the nominating committee have a little thing in there about the importance of it and what your role would be, so that you can hopefully get some people who would wish to step up to be elected.
Okay. The other one is, again, it's very specific. Kyle typed it out, but I was gonna ask the same question as well, because it deals a little bit more with vacancies, more than so elections. But I'll ask the question and let's get your perspective on it. If somebody steps down from, let's say, for example, a VP position mid-year, can the executive board vote or appoint to put somebody as within that current role or in the current position into that vacant VP position?
Yes, okay. The vacancy occurs during mid-year and it's a 1-year term for that particular person. Whatever the term left is, the executive board, this is the body that would do it, would have a vote, can't be appointed, would have a vote of the members attending that meeting. And what you would do is you would put an announcement out to the executive board that Mrs. Jones has stepped away as vice president. At our executive board meeting on whatever date, you should give prior notice, we will be electing a new vice president. And then you will take nominations from the floor or whatever, or somebody may just self-nominate. It depends on what your membership would like to do, but that has to be an executive board meeting. So only executive board members would be able to vote for that election. And yes, you can do that to fill the term. If you can't find anybody, that's not a good thing, but a vice presidency is not one of the critical offices that needs to be filled. So you might wait till the next election cycle if there's a short amount of time. But the best scenario is to have a vote at your next executive board meeting with prior notice to the executive board.
Right. So in
Remember
essence,
that your executive board, just as a, sorry, Rob, as a clarification, your executive board is your officers and your committee chairs. There's a specific
Mhm.
part in your bylaws that describes who's on the executive board. So know that, all right? Not everybody is part of the executive board. There are specific people who are.
And like you
All
mentioned,
right.
I think that's explicitly within the vacancies and how to address vacancies.
Yes,
in
it
the
is. It
bylaws. So,
is in there. It's, I think, the last paragraph on the nominating committee
Mhm.
section of the bylaws. Yes. All bylaws say that in their bylaws. All units bylaws say that. Mhm.
Yep. The next one is, can a mock election meeting be recorded and posted on the New York State PTA website?
Okay, well, I know we do have an election scenario on there on the COVID page. It's in writing. Could we do an election? I'll get back to you on that. Might be something that a few of us could get together and do. So that's a very good suggestion, and I will bring that to my leadership development coordinator, who's sitting right next to me here, Rob. But that's a very good suggestion. I do appreciate that, and that's something we will definitely look into and try to do for you.
Okay. I think the last one that I have is, can you elect the executive board members for the nominating committee in a closed meeting, or just the executive board? Or do you have to have a general members meeting to witness?
For the executive board members, only executive board members can vote. Okay, so even though it might be an open meeting where other people can be there, anybody who's not a member of the executive board cannot vote or nominate themselves for those positions. So that's important to note. So yes, it's at an executive board meeting, and it doesn't have to be a closed meeting. You just have to make sure that everybody who gets a ballot or is voting is a member of the executive board. Now, when it comes to the general membership meeting, then everybody who is a member can vote for the association members. But for the executive board meeting, it's only executive board members that can vote. And as I say, that's why I suggest doing the executive board meeting at 7 o'clock and then having your general membership at 7:30. That way you have time to ensure that all of your executive board is there to be able to vote, and then your general membership will come in later. But that's the only key, is that only executive board members can vote for the executive board members, but everyone can vote for the general membership members.
I think those were all excellent questions.
Very
Jackie,
good.
I think that's all the questions we have, unless somebody
Okay,
wants to
anybody
type
else
something
have something they want to address? Again, my information is up there. The webinar will be recorded and will be up on the website. There are other nominations and elections websites, and as well as the COVID page, which gives you a little more information on the technology if you must go to a virtual meeting. Okay.
Let me
Okay,
see
and
if we can-
just a public service announcement for our next webinar, which will be on December 7th, Wednesday, December 7th, and that will be hosted by the advocacy team. So that will be our topic in December. And if you have any other suggestions, please feel free. If you feel there's a topic that you would like to be considered for a webinar, we're always open to suggestions, and we do appreciate your input in that.
Sorry, Jackie, can I bother you to put in your contact detail in the chat just so that everybody has it?
Absolutely, I have to do that. Okay, here we go.
Not fast enough to open up my.
No, I'm not fast enough. Okay, I think I did it right. Okay, it's in there. Leadership training at nyspta.org.
Great. Thank you, Jackie. You can close us out. I appreciate everybody attending and spending your time or your evening with this important information, specifically about nominations. Jackie?
Thank you, Rob. And again, look for our announcements of webinars. They come out when the PTA Connection comes out. And by all means, go to the ones that we have in our website. We'll be having the ones from convention posted shortly. So anything that you might be interested in will be up there. Thank you so much for attending. We appreciate your attendance and your interest and your questions. Always good questions. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.